Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jenna Brown.
I'm Kevin Tomlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. Kevin, what is a pumpkin spice novel? Saw
It's
an email
just
pop in my inbox like right before we jumped on here, and
it's just like a regular novel. Same price, same text, same cover, everything. But I've dusted it lightly with spices and waved a cinnamon stick over it so that it is blessed with pumpkin spice goodness. So it's that time of year.
Actually
So
like pumpkin spice. I don't think anyone actually does.
No,
yeah, I like pumpkin spice.
no, no pumpkin spice. Black coffee, black tea
I do
only.
I do
That's it.
prefer black coffee, but sometimes,
wh-
you want to welcome in the fall with a ritual, So,
which one was pumpkin? I remember Sporty Spice. I don't remember pumpkin.
right. Yeah,
She was the orange one.
she was the orange one.
Ah,
Yeah.
Too
okay.
much spray tan. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's what's going on. It's nothing special.
I thought it was this really creative marketing thing, like you had some type of new type of novel you were putting out there specific for
Yes.
Halloween, or
Let's
short
go with
short
that.
stories, or something. But yeah, no,
No, I started doing this a few years ago. I made a joke on Facebook a long time ago that because everyone was sharing pumpkin spice nonsense, so I shared that my an image that where my books were all in pumpkin spice available in pumpkin spice now, and everyone laughed and ha ha ha, and I saw a little spike in sales, so now I do it every year.
Nice.
So now there's a
Well,
video. I did a commercial spot for it that I may actually include in an episode of Wordslinger podcast, uh, just to just to promote it. If you find me on if you type pumpkin spice novels in YouTube, you will find the spot.
you've cornered the keyword
I
market
have
of pumpkin
so
spice
far.
novel.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
What's going on in the news?
Well, in the news, aside from the pumpkin spice goodness, TikTok meets Tolkien. How the Folio Society attracted Gen Z readers. The Folio Society, known for its classic and historical publications, has seen significant growth by shifting focus to sci-fi and fantasy genres. This change, along with producing more children's books, has boosted their appeal, particularly with younger audiences. Popular titles such as Game of Thrones, Dune, and Howl's Moving Castle have contributed to this growth. The company has expanded its customer base with over half of its buyers now aged between 25 and 44. Young readers are particularly interested in fantasy titles like Tolkien and Game of Thrones, while older readers lean towards classics like James Bond. Platforms like TikTok and Instagram, especially Book Talk, have helped elevate the visual appeal of the Folio Society's artisanal editions from publishers. This is from Publishers Marketplace. I accidentally made that a bullet, but now I've read it out loud. So from
I think
Publishers
that was
you're
actually
Marketplace.
the
I think
next
you're
article that was from Public Market.
Okay,
See,
so
if
the
you bullet
next one.
things that I send you,
Well,
then
it did it on
we're
its
not
own.
we're
I
all off
didn't do it.
track.
It just automatically bullets things. So,
I feel like you're calling me old because like I was you're rattling off that list. I'm like, oh, I'd read the James Bond, and then I saw the other part of it. I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
yeah.
Because like
Yeah, my husband has some folio. I collect some things, but not folio. He doesn't do a lot of folio, but they look really cool. I think he has Raymond
They're
Chandler, and it's like a guy in a
beautiful.
fedora with some guns or something, and it's like a six-book set. So when you put them on your shelf, they look really pretty. But he's got the old guy books too. We don't have any of the
I have
young
not
people
seen
books.
these.
Yeah, they're
They're really
beautiful.
pretty
I love
books.
how
Yeah.
they line up on the shelf. And I think for some series you can actually just get the covers so you don't have to like actually get the book with it. But I don't know that they have that available for every series, but they're quite pretty.
Well,
Yeah.
I will have to check it out. Yeah, I just went on the website. Yeah, they look good. I like that. Uh, all right. Well, next up, Audible tests AI voice replica service for narrators. Audible is testing an AI-powered program allowing narrators to create and monetize voice replicas. Participants can submit a sample reading, which is turned into a high-quality replica that can be used in auditions via Audible's ACX platform. Audible ensures that narrators maintain control over how and where their voice replicas are used. The company won't use their voice replicas for content without explicit permission. This beta test follows a similar initiative by Kindle Direct Publishing, which began testing virtual voice narration for audiobooks in 2022. I like this, and I want to go add my voice so that my books can be read in my voice. I do this with 11 Labs, but it's very expensive to try to do that and create a audiobook out of it. So this would be
Did they
very welcome.
did they say what backbone they're using? Are they using Lemon Labs to pull that off?
Probably. I think they actually, Christine, I think you've mentioned before that they have a deal, right? With,
I think they do. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't quote me on that, but I recall saying that and now I have forgotten. But I mean, I think it's kind of neat, right? Because it takes you what, 8, 10, 12 plus hours to read an audiobook.
Yeah.
So
And I always wanted
yeah.
to do this in my voice because, I like the idea of me being the one narrating it, but I also don't have the time to sit down and do it. But I thought, if I did this and if it was in my voice and there was ever like a name that wasn't pronounced correctly or some word or term that wasn't pronounced properly, then because it's my voice, I can just record that bit and then insert it, assuming that I'm able to edit the audio at all.
Yeah.
But they may not let you edit.
Yeah. I think it's cool, especially because I have like major chronic breathing issues. I'm the idea of narrating for 12 hours is daunting. I'm like, oh, if I could do it short and they could just replicate my voice, I would probably do that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm terrible. I'm terrible at narrating. I'm guessing that this is probably more accurate and probably sounds better than I do in real life. So I might have to use it just because of that.
Yeah.
My only like looking at this, I'm just trying to think it through. Like I can see this cutting out a lot of newer narrators because you've got a ton of narrators that are big names. You take somebody like Scott Brick. Like people will listen to a Scott Brick book, because it's Scott Brick. It's not necessarily even about the book anymore. So like these narrators have these big fan bases, which means that they're going to be able to capitalize on that
Yeah.
basically forever, because this is just going to keep improving. So that means his voice is going to be out there forever, these other narrators. But it's going to be that much more difficult for new people to break into the market. Like this particular group of narrators are going to kind of dominate from now on. It's the same thing with the film and TV industry too. As they get into more and more AI, like we've joked around about Tom Cruise being in movies for the next 100 years. This is the same kind of thing, but for audio.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I actually don't really see the appeal of authors reading their own books, only because I think that there is an art to narration. And I think that, the narrators, they're voice actors and they understand the assignment, I think, better than most authors do, even though I think authors, are familiar with the book and, might think that they're adding like some depth to some parts, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that that's
I
it doesn't, I don't go out of my way if an author's reading an audiobook to be like, oh, I have to get that now. But I also prefer full cast audiobooks. So
Yeah. I
Yeah.
hate full cast audiobooks.
what?
Hate them. Hate them. I
I
hate
hate
I hate
music
the
in my
radio drama
audiobooks.
style.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't stand music.
But I'm going to say that my take on this is that there's going to be multiple markets for audiobooks. I think that
Yeah. Why
there's
not
always
both?
going to be, I think you can
Why
do
not
both.
both?
I think that the AI gives you an opportunity to lower the price of an audiobook, so you'll get those people who wouldn't pay for a full priced audiobook and can still get a decent experience. And then I think that that's going to enhance the human narrated product. I think that people are going to be willing to pay more for that experience. So that's my theory or hypothesis. I haven't done enough research to make it a theory.
I, for one, will be sticking with my full cast audiobooks because I enjoy them. And if they add
You can
sound
keep them.
bonus points.
Well, and I just want to make the offer. If anybody listening wants to use Kevin Tomlinson's voice for their audiobook, you are welcome. I will work
Yeah.
with you.
They should go listen to your Kevin ASMR pumpkin
Yeah,
spice.
go listen to the
Get a
pumpkin
sample.
spice novel spot. Yeah. All right, final story. This is a good one. We haven't had him on the show yet, but a friend of show, James Blatch, has a new podcast. James Blatch and co-host Kara Clare have a brand new podcast for indie authors, the Indie Writers Club. The podcast will be a weekly lighthearted chat about all things self-publishing. So, James, if you're listening, I know where you can find at least 4 guests for your podcast.
I don't know if it's an interview podcast.
I don't
think
either.
they
I haven't-
might be
yeah.
chatting. We'll find out, I guess. Yeah.
I need to reach out to him and ask him, like, what the heck is it? How about you come on my podcast to talk about your podcast?
Yeah.
How about that? And then you have
can
me on
both
your
come on
podcast.
this podcast.
And we can both come on this podcast to talk about podcasting for authors. So
Oh, sounds like a plan.
it's like
Podcasting
Inception, but for
Inception.
podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
JD, who's up this week?
This week we've got Taylor Moore coming on. Taylor's a former CIA intelligence officer who worked in both analysis and operations, later consulted for the Department of Defense. He's going to be here to talk about his latest book, which is called Cold Trial and releases September 17th. Taylor Moore.
Well, I am excited about this conversation, if only because I'm talking to a fellow Texan. I love talking to Texas writers. So, welcome to the show, man. I'm glad you're here, Taylor.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin. I'm excited too. And I'm excited because this is my first podcast for the new book. So this is extra special for
Oh,
me.
really? Oh,
Yeah.
man. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we got to make sure we do this right. Then that means I
Yeah.
have to make sure we mention the book. So that's
Yeah.
important. Let's get
That'd be
that out of the
good.
way right now, though, because you do have a new one coming out, and it's part of a series. But you've got Cold Trail, which is actually part. It's a Garrett Cole novel. The
hmm
fourth. This is your fourth book in that series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fourth book in the series. So, I was talking to my agent the other day and I was like, I feel like we just started this process and now, four's coming out and I'm working on five and we were talking through that and it just seems impossible, but here we are.
Yeah. That's so what do you think of the whole you've got a lot of times authors are just thrilled that they've got one, maybe two books, but now you're on number four. What's the process been like? How have things been different for book four versus book one?
I guess it goes back to that same the old joke we always hear about you have your entire life to write the first one and 9 months to write the second or 6 months or whatever it is, that
Yeah.
give or take. But once you get on that treadmill of producing, it's fast and furious, and so it's not as leisurely and it's not as fun as when you're writing the first one. There's the downside of the first one is that you're so anxious about, will anybody want this thing? That's
Right.
the hard part of that one. But once you are published and you've got another one on the hook, then you're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I gonna meet that deadline? And it's just a sheer panic for about 9 months. And but so it's different. It's just a different feel. So you have that confidence of knowing, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And somebody's liked this first one enough to want a second or third or fourth or fifth or whatever. But it's just, you want to keep things fresh. So that can be hard because you sort of everything went into that first one and then it's like, now what?
Yeah.
Now what am I going to do with these guys?
Yeah.
So you want to use what works for you, but at the same time you don't want it to be so similar that people are bored with it. So
Right.
that's a new challenge for sure.
I envy you because every book I release, I still have that feeling like, is anyone going to want this book? I still have that. 70 some odd books later.
Yeah.
So you one of the things I did want to call out, I kind of called this out when we started, but you're Texas is all over you, man. It's all over your bio, all over are the books themselves they're set in Texas.
Yeah, they're set in the
Yeah.
Texas Panhandle, Texas High Plains, which for me is kind of interesting because I'm not from here. I was from Central
Oh,
Texas, close to where
yeah.
you are, and that was
Yeah.
my world. And I grew up, in the farming and ranching community and all that sort of rural Texas. But as you'll know, as a Texas, rural Texas and Central Texas versus the Texas Panhandle are two entirely different things. I
Right.
mean, this was the part of the world that even as Texans, you got up here and you're like, what is going on up here? There's nothing. There's flat nothingness as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
And a lot of us that would go on the church ski trip or whatever, would kind of drive through here on the way to New Mexico or Colorado and go, wow, what's happening? I just know it's windy and it's cold.
Yeah.
So yeah, this book, but I moved up here about 10 years ago. My wife was from the area and that's how I got up here. So I've been here about a decade now. And when I, of course I was former CIA and defense contractor and all that. And I had to sort of reinvent myself a little bit when I moved here and became an oil and gas landman. And so when I saw the country up here, I've seen more country on the Texas High Plains than I bet 99% of the citizens who've been here since birth, just because of the nature of the job. I was out on these big ranches. I've been in every little small town, that you can
Yeah.
think of, and eating in every little diner and Dairy Queen from here to you name it. And so yeah, the book is set here on the High Plains, and although I'm not from here.
Yeah, it's I think it's a perfect setting for that kind of book too. I mean, it's a little bit like there's a lot of these authors who write about like Wyoming or Montana or something like that, and it does have a lot of that vibe to it. Like
Yeah.
there's like cliques of people there. I mean, I've spent time there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you know the area,
Yeah,
right?
so yeah, and it can get scary there, man. I mean, that's there can be some scary stuff going down in the
That's
panhandle.
why it's such a perfect place for a series. And I
Yeah,
and in book one and Downrange, I talk about it's a place where bad things can happen because nobody knows what's going on. Nobody really cares what's going on. It's
yeah,
we're just kind of up here fending for ourselves. And so, we were talking about COVID a little bit before things started. It was a great place to be for COVID
yeah.
because there's no one
You don't
around for the
you
most
don't get
part. I
much more
mean,
socially distanced than
you
yeah,
you were already socially distanced whether you
yeah,
liked it or not. And
right,
so when people were talking about how horrible it was, I was like, put on a mask here and there. Like, I mean, nothing really it's really changed that much, And
right,
so it's an interesting place. And I tell you, I get at first it's a strange place to be because it's so remote and so distant that you feel like you're sort of left out of of the rest of the world. And then
right,
sometimes when you turn on the news, you're like, thank God that I am. You're kind of like being away from where the zombies can get you or
right,
something.
right. Or
They're
at
like
least it's going to take them longer to get to you than
the zombies are going to have to hike along. It's going to take them a while at their pace, at zombie pace. It will take them at least
yeah,
months to get up here,
yeah, yeah,
but anyhow, so no, it's kind of a neat place, but it's a neat place to set a series because yeah, it's forgotten. It's a forgotten about place. And so when it comes to some of these crimes and things that I'm writing about in the book series, absolutely, it's a great place to set it because it's so remote and so distant. Things can happen, and things do happen. Just so you know,
right,
that people have told me about that. If I told you about them, you'd never believe it. You'd
yeah,
absolutely never believe some of the things that goes on. And you mentioned some of the other writers, Montana, Wyoming. Chuck Box he is a huge influence. Before I started this series, I would read a lot of thriller writers and, I'd say like, oh, I like what they've done here, or this is good. But I wanted to do what Chuck Box did for Wyoming. I wanted to do that, or Craig Johnson, I wanted to do that kind of thing, what they did for that area, for the Texas High Plains.
right.
And I wanted to give that flavor. And I call it world building. It's a world that exists, but it's a world that doesn't exist for most people, just
Yeah,
like most people haven't been to rural Montana or Wyoming. Most people haven't been to rural West Texas. And so I wanted to create that world. I really wanted to set the stage for the reader to sort of dive into this world and go, I can't believe the Wild West still exists, but it
right.
does. And that's what I aim to do. And I've had a good response from readers. I've had readers write to me from all over the world, and it's a funny experience because I'll hear people will write to, or people write to me and say, I want to come visit the Texas High Plains, and I always think, why? Everything I write about, it's either like there's blizzards, there's
Right.
floods, there's all these like crazy things that are going on, and then the cartel is trying to kill you, or Russian mercenaries, or something weird.
Yeah.
But I guess I've done it in an intriguing enough way that people are like, I
Well,
want
that's
to
a
see
good
this. I want to
sign.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's a
want to,
good
it's a good
sign.
sign, right?
Yeah, that's a bit like watching Fargo and deciding you want to go visit. That's
Right.
that's
Yeah.
crazy. Uh,
Right.
so I take it then. I mean, the setting obviously is very important, but like if you took those characters and put them elsewhere, would the story change by necessity, or like how vital is the Panhandle to your stories?
That's a great question. It's one no one has ever asked, and I love it when that happens.
That's what I'm here
And then
for,
because I can
man.
sit there and think, I don't know. It'd be interesting. Um, that would actually be an interesting concept to take these characters and put them in a city and see how they navigate, because they're all a bunch of country boys, and some of these guys don't know anything but in the case of Garrett Cole, he knows the world, but he knows it through the eyes of a Green Beret and a DEA agent.
Right.
And then some of his cronies that he's come to work with over the years are ex-cons, and they're country boy ex-cons that worked in the oil field or rodeo or whatever. And so, yeah, it would be sort of fun to take these guys and drop them in New York and see what happens. But
You'd have
I think they sort
you
of are
can't
who
steal
they.
this from me, but I had this idea of taking that song, Country Boy Can Survive, and writing a
Yeah,
book, we'll say loosely based on that idea. You can't steal
it,
that
it
from me, but that's what it would be like.
it would be like that. You know, I hear that song every now and I love Hank Williams Jr.
Yeah.
And those characters, you know, that Country Boy Can't Survive, that song, it's kind of who my characters are. They
Yeah.
really are. No matter where you
That's the
place
vibe
them,
of
they're
it.
gonna survive. And it's not just, you know, it's not like I'm from here and I'm writing these characters because I think they're neat. These characters really exist.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of them. I'm not saying I'm one of them, but I worked with them. You know, when I was in oil and gas, you know, I remember working with these surveyors,
Yeah.
and those guys, for people that know what a survey, you know, these are people that go on the land and literally like hit boundary points, you know, on fences or whatever. And we were doing them, of course, to drop stakes for an oil well. But these guys were like mountain men. I don't know how you describe them. Some of them were just not what we consider like normal people. And one of these guys, I remember the guys that work with me, like, oh, that guy you work, he's like, yeah, I used to work in the Everglades. He was a surveyor over there. They said, man, you know, somebody said he would just jump in there with alligators and swim across the swamp to like, you know, hit a point on something. And it's just a different breed of human that literally can survive probably almost anything.
Yeah. That's the stories we want to hear, though, you know?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want to know that there are those larger than life people actually exist out there, and
They really
they're
do exist, and they're fascinating. And so for people that ever, if you ever read the Garrett Cole series, you're going to read these characters and you're going to think that they're ridiculous in
yeah,
some ways. I mean, it's a little like Elmore Leonard, or, you know, some kind of
yeah,
like over the top, some of these characters. These people really exist, and nobody's one person in my book series, but everybody's like probably 3 or 4 people that I encountered along the way. And you know, so even the villains, the guys that are sort of villains, but you know, are kind of good too.
yeah,
They're based on people that I worked with. And you know, when I was doing this oil and gas thing, it was such a neat. You know, I was a landman, so I was what they call a surface guy. So I was the one that was going out and making these deals out on these big ranches. So I'd literally, you know, have a guy fly in on like a private jet. You know, make a multi-million-dollar deal with this guy. Then I'd go jump in a truck with a guy who'd been in federal prison for selling meth. So as a writer, you can just imagine the worlds
yeah,
coming together in the most unique and wonderful way, right?
yeah.
I was getting both the ultra wealthy with the guy, you know, who was just trying to like not go back to prison or not get
Right,
back on meth.
right.
And so yeah, so for anybody who ever reads the series, you're going to think these characters are made up, but they're absolutely positively real people in a way.
What about your CIA experience, man? Like, you know, it's so
Yeah.
far everything we're talking. I mean, it's an education to be around these. I grew up around a lot of these kind of guys, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that are in the panhandle and doing this stuff. And I was scared of them even growing up sometimes. But
Yeah.
you had to have had experiences in CIA that informed these stories as well.
Yeah, this book series is the weirdest one ever. It's a neo-Western mixed with a spy thriller or military thriller.
Yeah,
Somehow I managed to mishmash those things together, and I guess probably because they're me. You know, I was in the CIA, but I grew up on a farm and ranch in Texas. I,
yeah,
you know, did this oil and gas stuff up here, so I just threw all those experiences together, and I'd worked. When I was working with the military, I'd worked counter narcotics and counter illicit trafficking and all those different things. And so take all my experience and then me getting up here on the in the panhandle and going out on these ranches. And because people knew I would, you know, had been CIA, they would start telling me these stories to say like, hey, don't tell anyone, but let me tell you what's going on over here. And so, you know, again, little they know, here I am as an author, I'm start stocking these things away. And so I know when people read these books, they think, oh, the Russians, or oh, the cartel. Nah, like for real, like these are the stories I started to hear. And so as a writer, I just sort of put them all together and
yeah.
just, you know, put my own spin on it. But yeah, my third book, Ricochet, is all about Pantex. You know, a lot of people, have you heard of Pantex? A lot of Texans don't even know. So
No.
the only assembly and disassembly nuclear weapons facility in the United States is in Amarillo, Texas. It's called Pantex. And so I know, right?
Yeah, no
So
idea.
if you read Ricochet, it's all about Pantex. It's all about hijacking of nuclear weapons, and the idea came about from there used to be this thing called the White Train, and this train was literally painted white. It was like armored cars, like you would think of like from the old Wild West, you know, when they would haul gold. But these would haul nuclear weapons, and you have these special operations guys with machine guns hauling nuclear weapons across the country, and that went up to about I think the early 80s, and then they finally quit doing that. But I took that concept and I was like, what if they still did that? And there's a part of me that thinks they probably still do, but
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
why wouldn't they, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
most of it's hauled by semis, but you have the train network running all over the country, and so that was the idea of Ricochet. So basically, I take all these ideas, things that are really happening, really going on, and just fold them into a series. But no, the CIA stuff is very important. I have one of my main characters is Kim Manning, and she's a CIA character. That's we see her point of view, and there's always some sort of all these books are localized to the Texas Panhandle. There's always some sort of an international component to them, and so that's how the CIA stuff comes into play.
Yeah, that's got to be handy. I got a new book coming out that features a CIA agent. So you're not allowed to read that because I don't want to hear how wrong I got everything. But that's got to be a huge advantage to have that in your background, though, because like when I want to write something like that, I got to do a bunch of research, 99% of which ends up just being completely false, wrong. I'm misled by something or whatever. Are there ways, like if someone were going to write about the sorts of characters you're writing about, what would you recommend for them in terms of, I don't know, doing that kind of research and finding good information?
Yeah, I think, obviously like everybody, like anyone else, I'm using Google and all that, but I am a big believer in the horse's mouth, talking to people who've been there, done that. Now, again, the sort of interesting thing is because I was CIA, it's opened a lot of doors for me. So I have a ton of friends that are Navy SEALs and Green Berets and law enforcement, FBI and all that. So when I need that person, I just contact that person.
Yeah.
And if they don't have the answer, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'll hook you up," and they do. So so as of yesterday, I had a former Navy SEAL friend that helped me write. If for anybody who reads Ricochet, that first part, I won't give it away, but there's a whole scene that I wrote with a Navy SEAL that helped me write that scene that literally used to do that particular operation,
Yeah.
And so it's not like I'm kind of winging it. I'm literally having this guy go, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. And so we planned that thing out like a CIA SEAL, operation. And it went into the book, and so that's fun. So that guy was hooking me up with a couple of other military guys having a specialty in something else for this fifth book that I'm writing. So it's usually, if I don't know the right person, I can always get in touch with a person who will get me with someone else. And so yeah, anytime these military guys are really good about it because they have such a broad network of people to pull from. But that's what I do. I'll just hit up a ranger, I'll hit up a SEAL, I'll hit up an FBI agent and be like, "Hey, I need this." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I know a guy," and then they hook you up. And so I get most of my research from the people who've actually done it.
Well, a lot of people don't realize this, but I know the FBI does this. I've used this, but like they have these like media contacts where if you are writing a book or a film or something, you can call them because they want you to get this stuff right. So you can actually reach out to the agencies.
And that's true. You would think I would have done that by now, but I haven't. Well, again, I guess I can just sort of bypass the process a little bit. And just hit some person that's done it. But no, I probably should do that. Obviously I run everything through the CIA because they have to approve it, but
right.
But they're never very helpful. They never write back and go, "Oh, you should change this to this." It's always just like, "Is this, did you use any classified information or something?"
Right. Yeah.
I know, really I should connect with those guys better because now I'm doing stuff with, TV and film and all that. And it would make sense to better coordinate. And at some point I probably will, but
yeah. Well, it's a goodwill thing too. Like they like that. Yeah. I know the FBI folks like that. Like they want links. They they follow.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The SEALs, that's what's been so great for the SEALs is that, they're not any really better. Somebody would argue this, but they have a different skill set for what they do in special operations than the Green Berets, the Army Rangers, or the pararescue guys. It's all different jobs. But the SEALs have really had great success in getting their name out there and in Hollywood and in thriller novels and everything. They've done a great job of it. I think because of that success, it helps breed more people that want to do this. This is like, it breeds interest. And so it makes sense. It makes sense for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your process when you're writing a book. Is this Do you write daily, or do you have like a regimen you follow?
Yeah, I do. So it's varied over the years, but now I pretty much stick to 1,500 words a day.
Okay.
And that's usually like weekdays. Although, sometimes it intensifies to, 7 days a week. I stole that from Mark Graney, who probably stole it from someone
Yeah.
else. And I emailed Mark after. I was like, thanks for saying that. I said, this really helped me because I had this, always had this writer's guilt, that I
Yeah.
was never doing enough. But when I found that I had a good a word count to do every day, I could sort of check that box, and I literally do check a box on my to-do list that I've done it, and I scratch it off. That's kind of what I do, and I don't go back and look at it. I don't rewrite it, because if I did, I would probably cry, because it'd probably be so, it wouldn't be as good as I thought it was writing
So
it.
you don't you don't
But
you don't edit,
yeah,
or
I don't edit that at that moment.
that day? Yeah.
That
Okay.
day, yeah, I'll go back to it later on. But I kind of like to sort of just barf the story out, if you will. I kind
Yeah.
of like to just get it out there. Well, and I usually write in parts, one, two, three, four, and I can usually know in part one I want to do this,
Yeah.
and then I'll get to part two and I go, oh, now what do I do? I'll think about it a couple of days, and I'll be like, oh, and then I'll get to that, and I'll do it by parts, and I usually know where the story is going to go. So I don't do. I usually have a general outline. How I sort of know where the story's going to go, but it's not till the characters get on the page that I really like
Yeah.
get a feel totally for it. Sometimes characters change, bad guys become good or good guys become bad, that kind of thing. But I'll have a feel, but I can just kind of do it by parts. But that 1,500 words a day has really been it's been a lifesaver for me,
Yeah.
because it just helped me to eliminate that guilt that I always had, that I wasn't doing enough every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this what you're doing full time now, by the way?
Yeah, this is what I do full time. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing this and do some screenwriting, and but this is the books is the main thing for me. And
Yeah.
it's funny, incidentally, you probably know JD Barker, right? He's part of
Oh yeah.
this
Yeah.
show,
I've
and I
heard of him.
remember, yeah, you've heard of Jay. Yeah, so I told him one time at Thriller Fest, I said, I asked him about the Writers Guild, and he kind of, I can't remember what he said, but he's like, I don't have that. He goes, man, I work so hard, I've given that up, but. And I kind of like, but I was at a point to where I wasn't where he was, and now that I'm at a point where I've got a few books under me, I'm like, okay,
Right.
I can rest a little bit. I'm still always feel a little guilty, like I could be doing more, but I finally can get to where I
Yeah.
rest a little bit and not feel as guilty as.
I don't think that ever goes away. No matter
Yeah,
how many books you produce, no matter how many words you put down each day, it's like,
yeah,
that author guilt. It's like it's almost Catholic at its
yeah,
levels.
right, yeah. I
Yeah.
wonder if Stephen King still gets it.
I do want to ask him. I don't,
Yeah.
I'll have to pass a note to him through JD. JD knows him. Maybe
Oh
give
yeah,
him,
that's right. They do know. JD does know him.
JD knows
You know,
everybody.
now I have like social media guilt. I don't do enough marketing and social. That's just not my thing. And so I know I need to be doing that. But that's my new guilt. It's like I should be posting or doing whatever. But
Is that your primary means of marketing? Is the social media stuff?
yeah, I guess beyond whatever I'm with William Morrow, whatever HarperCollins does for
Yeah.
their on their end. But for me, it's just like I post here and there. But I don't do a great job of that. I wish I did. Do you do a lot of the social media stuff? Are you
More
good at
than I
that?
want. Yeah. A
Yeah.
lot more than I want to. But I don't think you're missing out on much. I mean, I don't think social media is much of a marketing tool, really. I mean, that's just my opinion.
I'm with you. There's some people that I think have used it really effectively,
Yeah.
at least with what I'm doing, like Jack Carr has done really well, but
Yeah.
he's a whole machine,
Yeah.
but yeah, for me to just really is it all just noise now? I think there was a
That's what I
sweet
think.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a sweet spot to get in on social media, and I think I missed it. Um, so I know I should probably be doing something. And if I'm being honest, people engage me on social media all the time. So I think it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's, people hit me up on their DM
Yeah.
on Instagram or Facebook, and I love engaging with readers.
There you go. That's what you need to
But
do then.
how,
Yeah.
yeah, at what level are you, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's that time versus impact. I don't know what the answer is on that.
Well, I do sort of ask myself, like, do I want to do TikTok videos, or do I want to write a book? And the answer has
Yeah,
always been the book.
me too. Me too. I
Uh,
want to write. That's me. I probably should, get some help with all that.
Was that something you had wanted to do like your whole life? I mean, when did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
So that's a great question, and I don't really know the answer. I will say this: I wrote my first book in the year 2000,
Okay.
and I was ranching with my dad at the time. I wasn't even, this was before CIA, before grad school, before everything, and it was kind of like a bucket list thing. So I would have been really young. That was, gosh, I'm almost 50, and that was 24 years ago. But so yeah, so it was kind of a bucket list thing. Can I write a book? And so I sat down on my laptop and over the course of months wrote a book and went, yep, I guess I can. So it's kind of like running a marathon just to say you did it. So I just did
Right.
it, and that was that. And I always kind of thought I'd go back to it, but ended up going to grad school, ended up doing the CIA stuff and all that. And you just that world sort of took over, and it wasn't until I was up here that I really started writing seriously again. And I think it was because I needed an intellectual challenge. I needed,
Yeah.
with the work that I was doing, I was busy, and there was a lot of challenges to it, but it wasn't using my brain in that particular way like it was when I was working in the intelligence community. So I started writing again. And again, it was just for fun. I never thought I'd really do it as a career, but
Yeah.
things change, and here I am.
Well, now that you're outside of that work you were doing, where are you taking your inspiration now? Like where are these ideas coming from?
I think, I still interested in international affairs. I'm still interested in the news and what's happening. I didn't realize how philosophical that I mean, and when I say philosophical, I
Yeah.
love the idea of what's happening and what is it doing to us, and what's going to happen in the future. And probably a lot of that is because I have small children.
Yeah.
You can't help, if I didn't, I'd probably be like, well, future is what it is. But because I have kids, I kind of care. And now,
Yeah.
I care anyway, but you really care when you have kids because you want them to be in a better world. And so the thing that's really driving me lately is the technology stuff. And I'm not a techie guy by any stretch of the imagination, but the AI, I know everybody's kind of sick of hearing about AI, but you can't be sick of. I mean, it's here, and it's going to change everything. And I
Yeah.
was kind of one of those people that had put my head in the ground a little bit, especially as a writer, because people were saying, "Oh, well, you don't have to write books anymore. AI will do it." And I was like, "That's stupid. It's never going to happen." And
Yeah.
I was sitting down with this marketing guy who was going to help me with some marketing stuff, and so he just pulled up, um, some of the AI tools that he had, and and I was blown away. I didn't think I'd be blown away, but I was blown away. And I drove home in a kind of a fog and kind of a daze from that meeting with him. And I thought, this is going to change everything. And it's not perfect. No, AI is not perfect, but neither was the internet when it started. And now look at, the level of what we do. And so I don't necessarily like where things are headed, but things are headed there anyway. So
Yeah.
this book that I'm writing now is geared towards technology, and what's it going to do to us all, and where does it all end, and at what point is it helping us, and at what point is it killing us?
Yeah. Is it part of this series?
No, it's a whole different book.
A whole
Uh,
different thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this fifth book I'm writing is all takes place on the Chesapeake Bay, and it gets into, it's less of the sort of military shoot 'em up stuff and more of a psychological thriller. I'm kind of calling it a little more of a Silence of the Lambs type of thing without
Okay.
without it being super gory, but more that
Yeah.
sort of things are happening, and someone following the trail to like see where it leads. And so it's got all sorts of elements of big tech and big pharma and deep state and all kinds of fun government conspiracy stuff that takes my protagonist down a rabbit hole that I hope will blow people's minds. It's kind of blowing my mind the more I look into it.
Yeah. Well, that's the future, but right now, Cold Trail is the current book. That's the one that one's going to be rocking people's world as of September 17th, right? That's the
Right.
release date.
Yeah.
So give us a real quick, like, what's the meat of the story for Cold Trail?
So Cold Trail, I can never. You asked me to boil this down, and
Yeah,
here,
I want
let
you
me
to
boil it down in 30 minutes for you. Anytime you ask a writer and an author to like, yeah.
Yeah.
So no, so for readers of the series, I always pick up about 9 months where I left off in the last book. And so for those people that have read the series and know it, Garrett Cole is this DEA agent who's sort of a spy come in from the cold, if you will. He just wants to be back on his ranch, have a normal life. He's adopted this kid. And but the problem is that, as I left off in book 3, Ricochet, he's in financial ruin. He's about to lose his ranch. So he ends up making this deal with the devil to work with this oil company that's sort of his local nemesis around there, in order to pay off his debts and sort of, have a clean slate so he can finally move ahead. And he'd had all this sort of problems in the past with the wildfires, things like that had really set him back. And so we everything looks pretty promising in book 4, but dun dun dun, there's going to be a problem, and the problem is, and this starts out in book 1. I never want to give, or at chapter 1, I never want to give too much away, but there's a gigantic explosion at a natural gas compressor station nearby, and for those people who don't know what that is, I won't even go into the details, but when you can imagine when natural gas blows up, it's pretty horrific, and this one was, and people get hurt. And but what he through a little bit of digging, he learns that there might be some foul play involved. And there's at the same time, almost, this sort of environmental group that's a little on the more radical side shows up, and maybe possibly on the more dangerous side. And so he's trying to deal with them and trying to do this investigation, and the investigation is leading into different places. And I'll put it this way: I never like to give too much away, but it takes you to a place that you don't think it's going to go. And so it's just a kind of fun it's just a story about an investigation of getting to the bottom of what happened and making sure it doesn't happen again. And as always, I say there's international intrigue, as there is in every story, but it's localized to I don't say it's not political by any stretch, but it brings up some issues of, here's these local people that just want jobs, and then there's sort of the environmental conservation issue that's going on that sort of put people at odds here, and they're trying to work their way through that and find the best solution for everyone. And so I think it's fun. So there's some comical aspects to this one. There's as always, but there's some serious aspects. This book goes a little bit darker, but it answers some questions for those that have been watching the series. They always deal with issues of regret, for lack of it doesn't really get into PTSD, but it gets into sort of survivor's guilt for different characters, and regrets of the past, and trying to make up for those things. So for all my characters that are people that have been following the story, there's going to be some resolution, some really good resolution in book 4 that I think that fans of the series are really going to enjoy. And then, of course, I kick over a hornet's nest again at the end. So there's more things that could be happening for future books, but I kind of wrap up a lot of the immediate stuff. So hopefully I was sufficiently vague here that it doesn't. I like to go into things fresh, but
Yeah, I think that's gonna do it. That's gonna entice people. So all right. So the book releases September 17th. You can pre-order it right now.
Yeah, pre-order.
And Taylor Moore Books, which people will be able to find a link to in the show notes, but that's where they can find more about you and the books and everything else that's happening in your world. So great looking site, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's hard to get it to that point. So hopefully people like it.
That's always the hard part. It's getting them to actually look decent. So I always try to make sure I applaud people. I know what the work is on that. So, last thing before we wrap things up, if you were going to give a solid piece of advice to writers out there about any aspect of the business, what's the number one piece of advice you'd have to offer?
The piece of advice I always give, and I gave it to a young lady the other day because she had done this, I'd commended her for it. But I always tell people to start and finish a book. If you are a new writer out there and you say, I want to be a published author, start and finish a book. And when I wrote my first book, I had other authors tell me, you don't know what an accomplishment that is, because so many people that call themselves authors never finish a book. And they said the act of actually start to finish, that's a big deal. So I would say for people who really want to be a published author, start and finish a book. The finish may be horrible. It may not be anything that you like or are proud of, but that's okay. But I think that's where the rubber meets the road for a real author, is anybody can just start this thing, but coming up with a finish that's satisfying and that really does the book justice is that's That's everything. That's everything in a book, because we've all read those ones that finish in a unsatisfying way, and it's terrible. But really work to get that finish. Now, I also give this caveat. I always say, if you like to write, this is just your escape. You don't care if you ever publish a book in your life. Start and never finish a million books, because who cares? This is just fun. But if
Yeah.
you really want to be a published author, then start and finish a book. Even if this isn't the book you want to like ever sell, start and finish it. That's what I'd say, because you will have that mentally that will prepare you for the next challenge.
Excellent advice, man. All right. That's Taylor Moore. The new book comes out September 17th, Cold Trail. Make sure you pick up all 4. You want all 4 books, but pre-order this one now. Thanks again, Taylor, for being part of the show, man.
Thanks for having me on.
First thing I want to say, by the way, is Taylor is one of the coolest guys I've ever had the opportunity to chat with. The whole CIA angle kind of won a lot of points with me, frankly. But my first question for you guys is, which state produces the coolest writers, and why is it Texas? Go.
I don't know, but I'm telling you, Hank 1 and 3. I don't know about your Hank Jr. there. We're gonna have to chat about this after.
What? You cannot
Hank
object to Hank Jr.
Yeah.
Oh well. Oh well. Okay. We'll circle back later around to that. Yeah, that's a legacy. So how is your life and career different once you've written maybe 4 or 5 books, or more than one book? I mean, I know not everyone in the call has more than one book. Sorry for those who get left out. But for those who have more than one book, how has it made your life and career different as a writer?
I mean, it gets easier to write them, right? Each one.
What
I find most confusing, yeah. Okay, to me it got easier. Where things kind of got confusing for me is they, as you get into more and more countries, like the books come out at different times. So like Fourth Monkey, which came out almost 10 years ago here in the States, is still coming out in brand new countries today. And I've got to jump on those interviews and pretend like it's my, brand new, latest, greatest book. But meanwhile, it's been so long since I looked at it, like I got to go back and like do a refresher on the character names and stuff before I get on those calls. So that gets a little tricky, especially when you start getting into the numbers. Like, I mean, I think I've got 12 books out there, so I can't even imagine an author who's got, 40, 50 and is going through that.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then, I think the bookstores too, at some point you've got so many books out there, you start walking into bookstores and you just start seeing at least one of your titles there, just because you've got, it's a numbers game, they sooner or later they pick one up and it ends up sticking on the shelves. So I'm finding more and more in there. I mean, sales and obviously has something to do with that too, but I think the more books you have out there, I mean, your overall exposure just increases. More people get to know who you are, and you start seeing the titles in more places.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say that I think it has gotten easier to write the actual books in some ways, but my experience has been, when I first started, it was really challenging to write those first like 3 books that took, years to write them. And then I kind of worked out this formula where I was going to put my butt in the seat and write every day, certain amount of words, started knocking them out. And then it got easier, but then it was like, well, okay, but now I want to improve the book. I want to do something different and make myself better as a writer, improve my skill. And so it got harder again. And then with each book, that's been the case. So it's sort of like the books I write now are just as hard as like maybe the 4th or 5th books that I wrote.
Yeah.
They didn't get any easier from there. Because I keep adding stuff.
No, yeah, I agree with that. It was kind of easier for a while, especially if you're writing in a series, the characters, you don't have, the world. But it's kind of like golf. Like I was like, okay, I got this. And then I started writing with JD and I'm like, you broke my golf swing. Now I have to like
JD.
put it back together again and be like thinking about what I'm doing. So I do think sometimes your golf swing gets broken by a new lesson. And then
that's a good analogy.
Again. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like, it's like I got really good at my style of golf. And then I started working with a golf pro, and now my hip hurts, my shoulders kind of dragging. So
I suck at golf, for the record.
Well, then
so do I. I can only drive. I cannot chip or putt.
I'm surprised
Driving
that
is the
Patterson
only thing I can do.
Played a game of golf my entire life.
I'm surprised Patterson will even write a book with you then, JD, because isn't he like all about getting out on the links?
He's brought it up before because I've been down in Palm Beach and he's out there pretty much every day. But the thing is, like, I've literally played on a real golf course one time. I've done miniature golf a bunch of times, but I've only been on a real course one time. And he plays with people like Tiger Woods, like when he goes
Yeah.
out there, So like, I don't want my second time to be with Tiger Woods
Yeah,
or
no.
like, it's going to be bad enough
You
as it is.
know,
But
Tiger Woods and those guys, they don't impress me. Go try to play from where my ball ends up every time. Then show me what a pro you are.
You just play best ball. That's the pity game. They're like, oh, we'll just play best ball when you
Yeah.
join the.
That's right.
Yeah, you just hit from where Tiger Woods drops it, and you're on into.
I'm teeing off from the putting green. Is basically that's my handicap. I don't know what any of that stuff means, by the way.
Perfect.
Handicap, right? This question, Jenna, you should be able to answer. And in fact, you've answered it before.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm kind of calling you out. I'm teasing you. But
all
how
right,
does
that's fine. I can take a punch. Just
when it's your turn to ask questions.
So,
So how does where you live influence what you write?
well, I mean, I like to infuse a little bit of Vegas. I guess not in everything I write, but it definitely, if I can throw a Vegas angle in there, I will. But that's just too easy because everyone loves Las Vegas. And they're going to pick it up just because it's Las Vegas a lot of times. And then you get to play with the aspects of Vegas that they don't know about. So I think that's
what I think would be interesting is, because you're an insider to a place like that. And you're right. Usually if you set a book in Vegas, people are going to be, a larger percentage of people are going to be interested in it.
Yeah.
But they're always expecting, like, do you feel like you would be disrupting their expectations though? If you like wrote about Vegas, but you're writing about, like, I don't know, some quaint area that only locals know about?
No, well, I mean, yes, but I never have done that. So I have a short story that is like Vegas adjacent. But you mentioned enough of it, and I did write a novel, and I have another one that I'm planning that is in Vegas. And so you do kind of have to give them like a little bit of what they expect, but then you can add more depth to it so that it's sort of like they get to feel like the box has been checked, but then it's more. But I just think it's a fun city. I also grew up in Reno, so I mean, like, I wouldn't be opposed to writing about like Lake Tahoe or Lake Pyramid. Like, those are weird, wild places that I think would attract people. And if you have, I grew up with the Donner Party, so like if like Alma Katsu wrote about the hunger, immediately picked it up. Like they're just things that I think attract writers to certain areas, and if you know that the author is from there or has experience with it, I definitely think, at least for me, I'm more likely to pick it up because it's interesting.
Yeah, who isn't passionate about cannibalism?
I'm trying to think this through. Like, I've lived in a lot of different places, but I was born in Chicago. I grew up down in Florida. Like, I've never, I spent the bulk of my life in Florida, but I've never actually written a book in Florida. But I've hit every other place that I've lived. So I've done Chicago, I've done Pittsburgh, I've done Newcastle, the island that I live on now. But the bulk of my years were spent in Florida, and I have yet to write a book based in Florida. So I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I want to forget Florida, or I need to write a book about Florida.
Yeah.
Not sure yet.
I don't write about where I live either. But nobody like knows where I live. It's not a big city. I'll write about Toronto occasionally. I'm actually 10 minutes from Detroit, but I don't think I've ever written about Detroit. I mean, I spend enough time there. There was like a top 10 list of like my city, why it's great. And up in the top was it's near Detroit. Like, that was what was great about our city, is that you can get to Detroit fast. So yeah, I don't know. I have to think about that, but yeah, I think it's a bit harder to do. Well, it can be fun though, because nobody knows your town, so you can world build there. Maybe I'll do that sometime, but I haven't yet.
So I asked him in the interview if he thought the story would change if he changed the setting, but kept the characters. I've actually done this before, or I've done an exercise kind of based on this, where my first series was a sci-fi series, and I always told people, the story would be it's character driven, so the story would be the same even if I, made it a pirate story or something. I'm not sure that's true, but I'm curious. Do you think your characters and the story itself would survive a change in setting?
Some, but definitely not all of them. I mean, the character could still be there, but I do think like sometimes the setting is sort of like a character trait in some ways. But I don't know. I guess it would depend. Like it's weird because I definitely think Las Vegas, like certain types of people live in Las Vegas. And I don't mean that to sound like insulting to anyone. It's just it's a very odd city, and I think that, there's a lot of fluctuation. So the people who tend to stay here, I think have certain personalities. But I think that's true of like a lot of big cities and small towns, right? Like, I mean, someone probably who loves New York City isn't going to be happy in like a tiny town in the Midwest. Maybe they would, but I don't know. I think you'd probably have to change it a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like the setting does kind of dictate at least part of the story. Like mine was a science fiction story. So if I took all of the sci-fi out of it, the setting was, I don't know. It really kind of depends because I could have had rather than crashing on a planet, they could have, ended up on a deserted island somewhere. But there was an element of and there was a sort of element of racism in that, these humans were against this alien who was suddenly thrust into leadership over the whole thing. I think I could still play with some of those elements, but there were aspects of it. There was an alien race that came along. There was advanced technology that played a role in the story. So I think the setting does influence part of the story. It's kind of unavoidable.
I do want to see you and Taylor both write a version of Country Boy Survive, though.
I
I want you
I
both to do it and see how it
I
comes
have
out.
thought about that for years. I kind of want to reach out. The music industry is they're so bad about like, overcharging you for the rights to things, but I would have to get the rights to really do it because it would be pretty obvious what I was doing, I think. So I'm tempted to do it though, because I think I've got people in my past and my history that I could imagine being that guy, that character, walking up and beating the crap out of some mafia guy or something in the middle of New York. I could see it.
I don't think you'd have trouble with that particular storyline. I mean, even though it's based on a song, as long as you're not actually using the lyrics themselves, you would probably be fine. And
Yeah.
and even there, it's just a percentage of the lyrics, so you could get away with something.
I want
Um,
to call it Country Boy Can't Survive though. So
You can. The titles aren't
you could.
protected, just the lyrics.
is that right?
Fun
I
fact.
thought song titles were
Oh no,
protected.
there are lots of books with different
Oh,
song
well,
titles.
now
Yeah.
we're in a new game. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Whole new world has opened up for
Whole new
Kevin
I
right
think
world.
now.
Taylor would be a better choice for writing that book though. I think his books have more of that flavor and my books do not. So
Mm.
uh yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Um have you ever borrowed, speaking of stories and songs and things of that nature, have you ever borrowed like someone else's story, like their personal tale, not their book, but some anecdote they told you as part of one of your books? I did this with Special Forces guys. I interviewed tons of SOG guys for when I was in documentary television years ago, and a lot of their stories are can be pretty gruesome, but they make great like extra spice for certain tales.
What's funny is I was working on a book before that I haven't published, and I had a guy punch a shark. And my readers are all like, that would never happen. And that was like one of the only
You're
things I
supposed
had
to do.
taken from real life because my friend,
Yeah.
shout out Brian, he's a Marine, actually punched a shark. And I'm like, that's so awesome. And
That's what you're
I got
supposed
called
to
on,
do.
yeah, I got called on out on it not being realistic. And I'm like, that was a real story. So sometimes when you use real life, people think it's too weird. Like it's weirder than the fiction.
Supposed to go for their eyes, right? Like,
No, the
or their
nose has
nose.
a lot of nerve endings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll
Of
shock them.
course, eyes or nose, that puts you like right in front of those teeth. So you're
Well,
punching, but you're probably going to take
but
some
then would you?
Another
hit
fun
points
fact,
yourself.
if they do get you with their teeth, punch in, not out, because their teeth are angled inwards. And if you punch, they'll get the gag reflex and you can get your arm out. This is why you have friends who are in the Marines. They will tell you things.
I
All
want to
right.
see you guys remember any of this as the shark is gnawing on you.
I'm,
Well,
I always keep
I will.
reference
I will
notes
pull
stay
out
in
out
a
of the
my
picture.
water.
in the pocket
I
of my
will.
swim trunks.
respect the shark's right to privacy and do not go intruding in their home because
Yeah.
I think that's rude.
It's
personally.
very unlikely that I will
It
ever
is
be
very
attacked by a
unlikely.
shark because everything in the ocean is trying to kill me, and
Right.
therefore I avoid the ocean.
Yeah, same with
So,
Australia.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have
Yes.
you all, not to completely change the subject here, but have you guys seen the video of the whale jumping onto the water and taking out the boat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you sent it to us in email.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that was in Portsmouth, which is right where I'm at. It's literally like right off the coast of my island here. Like that really freaked me out because we go boating all the time with our friends, and like you don't see any of this stuff when you're in the boat. You know, like everything's happening below the surface. Like you have no clue that whale is down there.
Right.
But they are. You know, and the
Mhm.
sharks are down there too. Like the island that we live on, there's a little harbor right off our beach. And it's like an inlet, and the water is warmer, and because of that, the seals come in there, and a lot of the fish come in there, and because of that, the sharks come in there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Back in the Spanish Civil War, they actually used to dump bodies in there to get rid of the bodies because the sharks would basically clean up the mess for them. You know, and that's right off our beautiful, idyllic, looking
Mhm.
little beach, that people take pictures of when they drive through. So,
The trick though is
stay out of the water. People don't
Get a
Sharks-
bigger boat. Just get a
Sharks-
very big boat.
yeah.
Gonna need a bigger boat.
Sharks are attracted to motion. So the trick is to take the body and swish it around in the water like a tea bag so that the sharks notice it and then they grab it and consume it.
This is not legal advice.
This is
And
not legal
Yeah.
advice.
Or
I am not a
survival
marine
advice.
biologist.
This is not survival advice. This is
Yeah. No. Definitely not.
Swishing things like tea bags is always good advice, though. This is my last question. We have to ask this last
All right.
question. Do you ever experience writer's guilt?
Yeah.
what is
And
writer's guilt?
Yeah, and I like that because I usually will just do like a time count, but I
Yeah.
always feel bad. I've been anti word count for a while, but I kind of like it. It's like, well, if you hit it, then you can be done. I don't know. I don't do word counts. I'm still thinking about it. I try to do time blocks, which I think also helps with writer's guilt. Like I've
Here's
written my
how-
hour and a
Helped
half.
me.
I don't
what
feel
helped me
guilty
the
about not
most
writing,
was,
but I still
so
do. I don't know.
BJ Fogg has a book called Tiny Habits, and what he says is that to cement a habit, what you do is you make it as tiny as possible and you count that as a win. So no matter what. And so for me, my tiny habit is just opening the Word document, and that's a win. So I get a star on my star chart for just opening the document. I don't have to do anything else that day.
That's very similar to what Neil Gaiman does. He has a set amount of time,
Yeah.
and his whole thing is like, I'm locked in this room. There's no internet. There's no anything. And I'm going to write or I'm going to have this document open. And whether or not I write is irrelevant, but I'm not leaving and I'm not doing anything else until the time is up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
but
might as well
that
entertain
makes
myself with
sense.
writing.
That's what I do
Because
too. I do the
once you
time block.
open it, like the
Yeah.
odds of you writing increases, which is true, but it doesn't matter if you write a word, a sentence, if you just look at it, like it counts. And I
Well-
think and you celebrate the win. That's the important part of
Yeah.
building the habit, is that you get to be like, yes, I did it. And then now you don't have anything to feel guilty about because you celebrated, and that's it. And
Here's my
I
writer's
still
guilt.
feel guilty after I hit my goals. I'm like, I should be
I
writing
do too.
more.
And
I don't know how to shut it off.
I will literally be writing and feel guilty for other things I'm not writing. Like, why am I not working on these other 3 books that I'm working on? I'm wasting time on this book instead of writing this other book.
Yeah.
That's
But
the
I don't
kind of
know
guilt.
if Stephen King still feels writer's guilt. So we got to get JD on that one to
I
ask
would
him.
feel that.
Yeah, JD's got to ask him.
Since you know everyone, do you in fact know everyone, JD? Is that the truth?
Not everyone. I'm trying to think. Like I kind of follow the same model, I guess, that Gaiman does. I sit down at my desk first thing in the morning, and I don't leave my office more or less, other than getting coffee and bathroom breaks. I've got the document open the whole time, but I never really had trouble getting my word count done. But
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, like, if I tried to skip that, like we went on vacation, we took 3 days and went on a little mini vacation. And like that to me is rough because, I should be writing, I should be writing, I should be writing. And like, luckily I've got my daughter and my wife there to kind of, drag me
Yeah.
along. But otherwise, yeah, I would have my laptop open and I'd have to knock out those words before I could really feel good about doing anything else that day.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what gets the books done for me in the end. So like, I don't really want that to go away either.
Yeah. Next week, I'm
Yeah.
actually going to be in Florida for Novelists Inc. And traditionally, that's been a rough week. I always do manage to get some writing done, but not nearly as much as I normally would. But so we'll see. And I'm actually doing more work at that conference this year than I have in the past. So it's going to be busy.
Yeah. Well, good luck, Kevin.
Thanks.
All right. JD, who is up next week?
Next week, we've got John Gaspard coming on. John's an award-winning author of the Eli Marks and Como Lake Players Mystery Series. He's a screenwriter, filmmaker, and director of 6 low-budget features. He's also written some craft books for novelists, The Popcorn Principles, More Popcorn Principles. He's going to be here to cover cinematic writing techniques and how to better leverage audio content. John Gaspard.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.